Please be seated. President, Vice President, members of Council, past presidents, faculty, fellows, members and distinguished guests, it's a great pleasure to welcome you to RCSI this evening for the 47th Annual Millin Lecture. It gives me great pleasure to invite the President of the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, Professor Deborah McNamara, to formally introduce the 47th Millin Lecture.
Thank you. Past Presidents RCSI, Vice President, members of Council, Vice Chancellor, Fellows of RCSI, members and affiliate members, distinguished guests and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to welcome each of you to RCSI this evening. My name is Professor Debbie McNamara and I'm President of RCSI. I would particularly like to thank our 2024 Millin lecturer, Dr. Christina Fleming, her husband Anthony, her son, her family here this evening. This lecture is held in honour of Irish urologist Terence J. Millin, who died in 1980. As well as being a past president of RCSI, Millin was a pioneer in prostate surgery and published an original description of the Millin retropubic prostatectomy in The Lancet. The Millin Lecture is a very special event on the RCSI calendar, celebrating as it does some of the most accomplished young surgeons of each generation. This year's lecturer is no exception. Dr. Christina Fleming is Consultant General and Colorectal Surgeon at the University of Limerick Hospital Group. She qualified with first-class honours from University College Cork in 2011, coming first in her class in surgery, and since then she has had a most distinguished career. She pursued core and higher surgical training through RCSI, while at the same time completing a series of additional postgraduate qualifications, culminating in two significant career milestones in 2020, the award of the Intercollegiate Fellowship in General Surgery at RCSI and a PhD from University College Cork for a large body of original research focusing on the complex interplay between inflammation and metabolism in colorectal cancer. Along the way, Christina has received every major surgical award for her research and published more than 100 peer-reviewed manuscripts. She was one of the early adopters and leaders of the collaborative surgical research networks that have subsequently enabled a generation of young Irish surgeons to pursue high-quality clinical research. Dr. Fleming travelled to Bordeaux in 2019 as the RCSI Progress Fellow to complete a fellowship in robotics and colorectal surgery, and has also visited London, Vietnam, and Kenya to pursue her clinical interests. Since her appointment as consultant surgeon in Limerick, in addition to a busy clinical practice, she has taken on a series of leadership roles at the European Society of Coloproctology, the National Surgical Research Support Centre, and the Limerick Cancer Trials Unit. And just today, she was announced as the inaugural chair of the RCSI Early Career Surgical Network by election from her peers. Her lecture this evening is entitled Future-Proofing Surgical Training, a Template for New Technologies. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Christina A. Fleming to deliver the 47th Millin Lecture.
Madam President, past presidents, Mr. Vice President, members of Council, colleagues, trainees, family and friends. It's the greatest honour to deliver the 47th Millin Lecture. Terence Millin was a surgeon, an innovator and an educator. As a consultant urologist, he was renowned for describing retropubic prostatectomy in 1945 in his landmark Lancet paper. Recognising the significant morbidity associated with transvesical prostatectomy, he described a surgical approach that was in essence less invasive and thus reduced morbidity and improved preoperative mortality. Following his operative career in the UK, he returned to Ireland and was elected president of RCSI in 1963. But at the earliest point in his life, he was born into the small community of Helens Bay in County Down. With a small population of approximately 1,800, it has produced world leaders across many domains. Terence Millin, innovator and surgical leader, Andrew Bree, Olympic swimmer, and Michael Dean, Michelin star chef, to name a few. And this is a somewhat similar small community, the community I grew up in Castle Island in North Kerry. Again, with a small population of only 2,500, it has been quite a successful community. It has produced over 51 international basketball players at underage and senior level, 3 British and Irish Lions straddling the amateur and professional era, 8 international rugby players across male and female grades. In the past 3 years, players have been awarded 7 Ladies Gaelic Football Association All-Star Awards. It was the home of the prolific sports writer Con Houlihan, who sadly passed away in 2012. And now it can boast its first Millin lecturer. I believe the concept of community is vital in surgery. As a surgical community in Ireland, we are also a relatively small community compared to our international peers, with RCSI as our central hub and a strong network of robust surgical departments spread throughout the country, north to south and east to west. And we are also a very successful community. We are leaders in surgical training. Irish trained surgeons are hailed as some of the best trained surgeons in the world. Our commitment to high-quality delivery of cancer surgery with formal centralisation to improve quality and outcome is relatively unparalleled. Our ability to recognise the importance of diversity and inclusivity, and not just define the problem, but create a tangible opportunity for change. And more recently, recognising the disruptive potential of new technologies and planning for this impact on delivery of surgical care in Ireland. I think these examples demonstrate that as a surgical community, we are continually adapting to change. And embracing change is critically important for surgeons, as surgery in itself is continually evolving. Moving through some landmark phases of surgical evolution, from open surgery to now the evolving digital surgery era, whilst each of these operative techniques may wax and wane in importance on a daily basis, all techniques remain relevant to modern surgical practice, and the pressure to learn and train in multiple surgical techniques has never been so great. And if I reflect on the past month of my surgical practice, I have used all of these surgical approaches and some more. And this is the reality of delivering undifferentiated general and colorectal surgery care in a large university teaching hospital in Ireland. And this diversity in surgical practice has been hugely supported by technology. The recently published New Technologies for Future of Surgery in Ireland report, commissioned by past President Professor Laura Vianney and led by Professor Ronan Cahill, further highlights how technologies are rapidly changing the landscape of surgery, with the aim of technology to improve patient care and outcomes, but there is concern regarding surgical community preparedness for the pace of new technologies coming into surgery, which has never been faster. In particular, there was a general feeling of underpreparedness regarding collaboration between clinical units, government, the HSE, and important industry partners. There was a clear desire expressed for RCSI to continue to support surgeons to achieve technological integration in this fast and changing landscape. And on reflection, perhaps concerns regarding preparedness are somewhat related to concerns over change and concerns about remaining relevant in a very changing innovation landscape. But change is constant in life and society and surgery and even in sport. And as a Kerry woman, I have been quite interested in following developments regarding Gaelic football and how it is facing a relatively significant crisis at the moment due to various reasons and competing interests. But recognising the need for change, the President of the GAA tasked the Football Review Committee, led by Dublin legend Jim Gavin, to establish a new blueprint for Gaelic football that would create a more exciting, more dynamic playing and spectator experience and ensure that Gaelic football remained relevant. And reading the terms of reference for the review committee, I couldn't help but recognise parallels to what is important regarding change in surgery. It is critical that we also ensure sustainability of surgical practice, but also our surgical workforce. It is important that we remain loyal to the basic principles of surgery, and all of this needs to be achieved while continually embracing new innovation. Because innovating allows us to continually improve patient outcomes, operative performance, and system efficiencies within the strained system that we work. Robotic surgery has been the most significant innovation change in surgical practice in my training and career to date. The Oxford Dictionary defines robotic surgery as surgery carried out using mechanical arms, controlled by the surgeon, bearing surgical instruments and a camera. It is a method of delivering minimally invasive surgery with favourable benefits. And whilst laparoscopic surgery is the traditional form of minimally invasive surgery, robotic surgery has allowed it to go one step further with improved visualization, dexterity, and precision compared to straight stick operating. And demonstrated are the three main systems that are currently CE approved and in the market for soft tissue robotics. Generally, each system comprises a surgical cart and robotic arms, a visual cart for the bedside, and a surgeon's console for operating. And whilst multiple other navigational and orthopedic and neurosurgical robotic systems are also in use, with my background in colorectal surgery, the discussion of robotic surgery in this lecture will continue to focus on soft tissue robotic surgical platforms. And surgical robotics is an extravagantly expanding market, currently valued at over $9 billion, with the market forecasted to grow even further to $23 billion in 10 years' time. So the market clearly believes that surgical robotics are here to stay. And for those that aren't familiar with the robotic system, here's an example of the robotic Da Vinci Xi system that we use in our operating theatre at University Hospital Limerick. After establishing a pneumoperitoneum, we insert robotic-specific ports into the abdomen, and then we activate the surgical cart and bring it towards the patient, where we can then dock the arms onto the bespoke robotic platforms. And this allows the surgeon to sit remotely and perform the operation from the operating console. And robotic surgery platforms offer many technical benefits compared to traditional laparoscopic surgery that I feel improve delivery of surgical precision and also overall procedure efficiency. The 3D visualization offers an improved view of planes and structures, for example here performing posterior TME. The endo-wristed technology improves dexterity that increases procedure efficiency, particularly with intercorporeal suturing, compared to straight stick suturing, as demonstrated here. And they are reported that this can translate into a potential saving of time of 1.5 minutes per knotted suture. And the ability of the operating surgeon to control all 4 robotic arms compared to 2 laparoscopic arms offers further improvement in efficiency. The operating surgeon has full control and stability of the robotic platform. There are also significant surgical training benefits in robotic surgery, and these examples relate to the dual console Da Vinci that we use. Personally, I think the stability of the platform and the ability to transfer control of the operating controls with the press of a button really supports the physical diversity in our surgical workforce, as I tend to be quite a bit shorter than some trainees and taller than others. So when transferring laparoscopic instruments, it means firstly an entire change in physical position at the bedside, but also sometimes a change in the height of the operating table, and often the retraction and setup you've established for the trainee to proceed is lost. We're returning to why we innovate. Throughout my career, I have worked with phenomenal colleagues to have the privilege to study how robotic surgery can achieve improvement in patient outcomes, operative performance, and system efficiency in many areas of colorectal surgery practice. And we are continually trying to learn more and more, collaborating with national and international colleagues, and evolving our research focus on more high-risk areas, while centrally placing patient-reported outcomes into core outcome reporting. But the main focus of this lecture is not to convince you about the relevance of robotic surgery. It is about surgical training. It is about integrating training in robotic surgery as a new surgical technology in parallel to traditional surgical training structures, and how we can use this evolving experience to address some concerns regarding preparedness for other technologies to create an adaptable, sustainable training model. And the question is often asked, well, why is training in robotic surgery different? Well, I hope I've demonstrated in the previous slides describing robotic surgery that a robotic surgical platform is a complex surgical technology, and introducing a complex surgical technology to a complex clinical environment requires significant technical and non-technical training. We also have lessons to learn from the introduction of laparoscopic surgery as the precursor to this. The first laparoscopic colorectal resection was performed in 1991, and whilst the benefits were quickly recognised of minimally invasive surgery, there were concerns regarding oncological outcomes. But it took until 2017 to establish structured laparoscopic training programmes outside of fellowships, a total of 16 years later. And I think this lack of training preparedness isn't acceptable in modern surgical practice. With rapid advances in innovation, there is a far more urgent need for a structured and adaptable approach. And with the initial introduction of robotic surgery, there was a very clear and structured vendor-led or industry-led pathway. Typically, an institution purchased a system, nominated surgeons who undertook this comprehensive training pathway that provided foundational skills through simulation training and intensive lab sessions. Following that, an external proctor supervised the surgeon's first number of cases and ultimately evaluated and signed off on their competency. And whilst this was and still remains a very robust training pathway, it was exclusively designed for consultant surgeons, with no facility within the pathway for surgical trainees to obtain certification. And as this is a lecture focused on surgical training, I think it's important to reflect on my surgical training. Following core training, I undertook a basic specialty year in Wexford General Hospital with Mr. Ken Mealy and Mr. Carl Schmidt prior to SPR training. I took some time out after ST4 to complete a translational science PhD in UCC on perioperative metabolomics in colon cancer, supervised by Professor Paul Redmond and Mark Corrigan, with a period spent at the Berlin Institute of Health with Dr. Jennifer Kerwin, supported by an EACR travel fellowship. During training, I held various leadership positions, including chair of the Irish Surgical Research Collaborative, vice president of ASSET, and various working groups within the European Society of Coloproctology. Following completion of training, I completed an ESCP-approved robotic colorectal surgery fellowship in advanced pelvic malignancy with Professor Quentin Denost in Bordeaux, which was supported by the RCSI Progress Women in Surgery Fellowship. And I subsequently was appointed to the UL Hospital Group as a general and colorectal surgeon and commenced in post 2 years ago this month. And it was during my PhD in 2017 that I got my first introduction to robotic surgery at a Foundations in Robotic Surgery course. Not surprisingly, it was in the institution that I now practice, the first department in the country to perform robotic colorectal surgery, the first case in the country performed by Professor Calvin Coffey, my now consultant colleague. I was instantly intrigued by the improvement in precision that was offered and ease at which surgical skills could be practiced, with promising improvements in patient outcomes discussed. The following year, as I returned to the unit in Limerick as an SPR, I wasn't a consultant, so I didn't qualify for formal vendor-led training, but there was clear informal access in the department to complete elements of the pathway in preparation for practice. Following completion of ER simulation, I completed cases as first assist at the bedside and progressed to early console skills. And this period also ignited my passion for researching this novel technology and developed a more in-depth understanding of what the strengths and niche lay for robotic surgery and colorectal surgery. For my final year of training, I continued developing robotic surgery skills in the Mater Hospital with Professor Anne Brannigan and Mr. John Keneally. As I arrived prepared with basic robotic skills, this time was really focused on console skills, performing increasing elements of colorectal, abdominal wall, and hepatobiliary procedures. I supplemented both of these periods with accredited cadaveric robotic training in the IRCAD in Strasbourg and the RCSI Centre in Ghent. And my fellowship really complemented this training in Ireland with high volume, complex case mix. And as I progressed, I got increasing opportunity to both train as well as operate. And prior to independent consultant practice, I applied for a certificate of equivalence from Intuitive Surgical. And while this training journey culminated in developing proficiency in robotic colorectal surgery, I became a robotic surgeon, a robotic surgery trainer. And supplementing this with academic work and working groups, I became an expert in my field. But how I got to this point was quite opportunistic. I was lucky as I worked with robotic surgeons who were passionate about training, but it lacked any real structure, particularly in surgical training. I didn't have a formal curriculum, so informally used the vendor-led curriculum structure as a guide. I didn't have a guaranteed pathway to certification to prove my proficiency, but certificate of equivalence from industry did come into effect, and this all became important from the point of view of clinical governance prior to taking up my consultant appointment. At the same time, in 2018, the Future of Surgery report, led by Professor Richard Kerr on behalf of the 4 Royal Colleges, including RCSI, set out a vision for how surgical training would need to change with evolving and changing technological advancement. And coincidentally, at this time also, James Kinross and his group in 2020 from Imperial also quantified the increasing practice of robotic surgery that was observed, with 86% of prostatectomies in the UK and Ireland during this period performed robotically. But even with rapid expansion of robotic surgical training and robotic surgical practice, there wasn't much change in surgical training curriculum. And the updated JCST version of the curriculum which we now practice makes no reference to robotic surgery. So this created somewhat of a disconnect for surgical training, as with increasing practice of robotic surgery, there was a parallel decrease in training opportunities in lap and open surgery, but the curriculum didn't reference robotic surgery. But to mandate for robotic surgery in a training curriculum from a training governance point of view requires a definite and defined volume of robotic surgery trainers and guaranteed access to robotic surgery platforms, And at the time in 2018-2019, there was no major academic work in this space, specifically focused on surgical trainees to explore the landscape and impact of robotic surgery on surgical training. I was at that time Vice President and National Representative of the Association of Surgeons in Training, or ASSET. ASSET is a pan-specialty surgical trainee group in the UK and Ireland that is an independent entity with an executive committee supported by national, local and trainee specialty organisation representatives from throughout the UK and Ireland. And a key strength of ASSET is the central seat at the table that they held to all avenues involved in surgical training, design and delivery, to bring the trainee perspective to the conversation, particularly at times of significant change. And I gained significant experience and insight during this time. ASSET also works closely with the Irish Surgical Training Group here in RCSI, and they are now an executive member of the Executive Committee. At this time of robotic surgery expansion, we developed an ASSET working group specifically focusing on robotic surgery and its impact on surgical training. Our overarching aim was to better understand the landscape of robotic surgery training in general terms, and the overall impact on training for trainees. Firstly, in early 2020, prior to COVID, we explored what degree of access surgical trainees had to robotic surgery training opportunities across Ireland and the UK. Urology and colorectal subspecialties comprised the greatest proportion of respondents, and just over 1 in 10 in their current rotation had access, and 1 in 4 in any of their previous 4 rotations. Subsequently, through mixed methodology, including qualitative and thematic analysis, we explored experience, barriers and enablers for robotic surgery integration into surgical training for surgical trainees across all surgical specialties, and the parallel lived experience of how robotic surgery was impacting on other training opportunities. It was interesting to note at the time pre-COVID that 90% of trainees believed robotic surgery would be important for the future of their specialty, and 77% believed that it should be implemented into formal training. Key enablers of robotic surgery were identified, including potential for improved technical performance by novice surgeons and potential for improved patient outcomes and increased digital health transformation during the pandemic. But a number of barriers were described, and taking the latter three together, consultant learning curve, additional operating time and acquisition of other skills. As previously outlined, 14% of trainees reported that robotic surgery had negatively impacted on their surgical training, and it was mostly for these reasons. It was also mostly reported by trainees in phase 2 of training, that is from ST3 to ST5. In these years, trainees begin to gain experience in resectional surgery, for example, in GI specialties. Being able to perform straightforward, open, or MIS resections is a key learning goal at this stage of training. There was a resection on the reduction in hands-on operative experience in robotic surgery due to the consultant learning curve, but also training opportunities at open lap resections because there were fewer cases listed open or lap, and less complex cases were ideally used for the early learning curve in robotic surgery. So to strategically approach this, we broadly categorised enablers and barriers into 3 main themes of practical implementation, preparedness to avail of robotic training, opportunities in the operating theatre, and finally, overall training, governance and design and delivery of robotic surgery training specifically for surgical trainees. And these enablers and barriers need consideration in the wider context of changes to surgical training, the everyday balance in service provision and training, bed pressures, cancellations, inconsistent training opportunities, change in work patterns and work practices, and societal expectations of practice and outcome, whilst also navigating new technology-relevant relationships with evolving innovation, and we studied all these areas. And a lot of these challenges we identified are echoed in the New Technologies for Future of Surgery report, and by early career surgeons throughout Europe, particularly with expanding surgical innovation, the importance of building industry partnerships to ensure meaningful clinical input in the innovation cycle, and the need for structured guidance on navigating these relationships is really desired. So I will discuss a key area under each thematic category that is currently supporting training surgical trainees in robotic surgery, as these are all adaptable approaches for any new technology. I will discuss these 3 areas probably in reverse of how they should be described, but the surgical trainee was never placed within the model of training that was initially devised for robotic surgery, mostly due to market forces and the need to firstly train consultants in robotic surgery, which obviously was essential. So organically, each of these important approaches have been implemented somewhat in reverse. To start with the concept of structured parallel component training. In this model of training, surgical trainees of differing levels can train simultaneously in different components of a procedure within a single operation, which in this example is a robotic anterior section. This is a very effective way of overcoming barriers regarding the consultant learning curve in particular, as when the trainer has mastered a component, that component can become a training opportunity for the surgical trainee. And this is how I trained on fellowship with my trainer, Professor Quentin Denast, at the University of Bordeaux. And I'll briefly demonstrate 3 steps of component training for total mesorectal excision for rectal cancer to demonstrate the process. So firstly, the first step is performing IMA ligation. And we commence dissection anterior to the sacral promontory along the medial peritoneal reflection of the sigmoid colon, and continue dissection to identify the inferior mesenteric artery, which is divided close to its origin using Liga clips, usually applied by the robotic system. Following this, the next component is lateral mobilization of the sigmoid colon, and this is commonly the first component suitable for the novice surgical trainee to perform as part of a robotic procedure. And then finally, continuing posterior dissection inferiorly down into the posterior TME plane, very much a component for senior trainee or fellow level. And Professor Denast has demonstrated that this is an effective training method through training of trainees of varying levels from SHO to fellow in this model over a 6-month period. He demonstrated a significant improvement in GEAR score, a global robotic skills assessment for all users of this model, whilst also maintaining high quality clinical outcomes for patients. But to get to the point of using parallel component training, trainees require preparation. As a robotic surgical platform is a complex technology, they require a theoretical understanding of the system, practical teaching in the bottonology, which is required for each surgical platform. And finally, they require an opportunity to develop and practice basic skills through simulation, so that when in the operating theatre, they are ready to go. And to explore how best to approach this, our working group, along with collaborators at UCL, invited stakeholders from all surgical specialties to take part in a Delphi process, with the specific aim of defining in detail the required components of a potential pre-procedural co-robotic surgical curriculum and a framework for how it could be delivered in parallel to current surgical training, with the overall aim of preparing surgical trainees to properly avail of robotic surgery training or opportunities in the operating theatre. And this is the model we proposed. There was clear consensus that e-learning components should contain multiple modules, including hardware description, troubleshooting, for example, what to do when instrument alerts appear on the operating screen, or a flashing alert light emerges on an operating robotic arm. Knowledge on the practical docking and undocking procedures, along with description of AI and digital adjuncts, were also desirable. Currently, the most common AI technology that we use routinely is the AI feedback loop integrated to the Sureform robotic stapling device. By analysing tissue and pressure, it identifies the optimum compression required prior to staple firing, which improves precision. And the next clip is an excellent demonstration of other digital adjuncts that we can seamlessly use with robotic surgery. And here is an example of using ICG and Tilebro technology that is a robotic, the case is a robotic CBD exploration that I did as a final year SPR in the Mater Hospital with Mr. John Keneally. Here we firstly use ICG and Firefly technology to identify the CBD, and following colodichotomy with visible flow of bile, the Tilebro is superimposed and the colodocoscopy image is further superimposed onto the robotic console to support full duct clearance and control by the operating surgeon. Following e-learning, there is consensus that device training should be delivered for each robotic system that a trainee has clinical access to, and this should cover the overall practice and utilisation and operation of the robotic surgical system and the procedure for bedside first assist. And here our current ST8, Carolyn Culnan, is demonstrating this components of device training on the Da Vinci Xi, demonstrating how to move and adjust and organise the arms of the surgical cart, ergonomic adjustment of the surgeon's console, basic movement of the controls at the surgeon's console, which more senior trainees get to do when they get to that point of training. And following from this, critical first assist skills, including system docking and arm attachment, we will shortly demonstrate. Here we can see the surgical cart arriving at the patient bedside. We're now going to target the system. And these are all very good and important skills that trainees can avail of practically in the operating theatre when prepared. Completion of e-learning and device training allows trainees to progress to simulation and development of basic robotic surgery skills. Simulation does not replace surgical training, it increases training opportunity by preparing trainees with skills transferable to real-life operating, and we have previously demonstrated support for surgical skill performance improvement with simulation using virtual reality simulation. And each robotic surgery system has its own VR simulation system. This simulation allows development of proficiency across a broad range of surgical skills that are required to perform live robotic surgery operating. Furthermore, the VR simulation packages use AI and machine learning principles to generate automated performance metrics to score the simulated skill performance and identify areas for continual improvement. And this form of simulation can be availed of on any robotic surgical platform in any robotic surgery program anywhere in the country. And with increasing arrival of different robotic surgical platforms, how do we factor in understanding transferability of surgical skill from one robotic platform to another? And how do we understand the relevance of this to surgical training in a more platform agnostic way? There is very little data in this area to date, and Mike Devine, current RCSI Star MD student, along with his supervisor, Mr. Dara Kavanagh, are currently exploring this through simulation-based research with surgical trainees and trainers in various robotic surgery departments in Ireland. And these videos are of my skill performance or underperformance in Mike's research, where he is using a hydrogel-derived ventral hernia model from the International Medical Robotics Academy. Along the top panel, I'm performing the procedure using the Da Vinci Xi system in our hospital in Limerick, and along the bottom, performing the same steps of the procedure on the CMR Versius system in RCSI, and we really await those results. The added benefit of hydrogel models is their high fidelity to normal tissue, but suitability to use in multiple environments, including the operating theatre. And this has the potential to bring high-fidelity robotic simulation training into robotic surgery departments anywhere in the country. So addresses further the challenges of access. And the photo on the bottom left is from our operating theatre in UHL on call on a quiet Sunday afternoon. The final arm of simulation we recommend is the importance of integrating non-technical skills training into a pre-procedural curriculum for trainee preparation. The dynamic of the operating theatre is very different, with the introduction of a complex robotic surgical platform, the team dynamics, the methods of communication, and how to manage emergency scenarios like a cardiac arrest with an unscrubbed remote operating surgeon. This is something I was first introduced to in 2018 as an SPR in Limerick, where we regularly practiced emergency undocking procedures as a theatre team, and the data would support that regular rehearsal of emergency undocking can reduce the procedural time from 2 minutes to 30 seconds. So how do we practically deliver elements of required training? Well, e-learning can be quite self-directed on a laptop or PC. Device training requires industry facilitation, but can be delivered along with simulation using a hybrid approach, either nationally in RCSI or regionally in robotic surgery departments where available. CMR Surgical in particular have advanced work using VR headsets and robotic controls to try and bring device training and simulation even closer to home for trainees, as demonstrated here by Ben Shanahan, Cardiothoracics SPR. And we've had a very successful robotic surgery cadaveric training programme delivered for SPRs here in RCSI, as already highlighted. And with hydrogel models, high-fidelity simulation training of this nature can also be delivered in peripheral robotic surgery departments. And we tested this theory in April of this year, delivering an IMRA robotic right hemicolectomy course in Limerick. So what does all of this look like when combined in a training template? Well, it's important that all relevant stakeholders are involved in design and delivery of training. The primary components should include e-learning, device training, and simulation, with the facility to perform baseline evaluation to progress. And while e-learning can be self-directed and delivered at an individual level, a hybrid approach of regional and national delivery of device training and simulation training is preferred, which requires industry support to deliver. And it is important that we maintain strong symbiotic relationships with our industry partners in this domain. And having completed this curriculum, proficiency can be assessed and progression to procedural training, quality assured, certified and supported for surgical trainees. Surgical trainees Carolyn Culnan and Mike Devine recently systematically reviewed the literature on co-robotic surgery curricular training programs. And they identified 121 publications reviewing or discussing this topic. In summary, there are 5 specific generic curricula reported, similar to the principles we described, and 3 from specialty associations, with a clear progression pathway to procedural training. What we did note was most robotic curricula are aimed at established surgeons, in contrast to the surgical training model for trainees, which combines time, volume, and proficiency-based training for inexperienced surgeons. The International Medical Robotics Academy, or IMRA, based in Melbourne, boasting an Irish surgeon as their Director of Clinical Research, Helen Mohan, who is a consultant surgeon at the Peter Mac Cancer Centre, have devised a foundations of robotic surgery curriculum that better fits this profile for trainees, as it is suitable to both novice and experienced surgeons, as an introduction to the theory and principles of robotic surgery in preparation for safe robotic surgical practice. And this is integral to our future plans in RCSI. And while I've spoken a lot about pre-procedural training, training in specific procedures still remains critically important, but the knowledge and training gap largely exists in developing a structured approach to more basic robotic surgery training within surgical training programs that prepares trainees for live operating. And this brings me to the final thematic category of our work on training governance. In Ireland, surgical training is governed by RCSI as a central stakeholder within the JCST and SAC training structure, and with in-post training delivered by a strong network of surgical trainers throughout the country. And it is clear from the most recent strategic plan from 2023 to 2027 that RCSI is committed to adapting training in line with emerging technologies, in particular robotic surgery. All Model 4 hospitals in Ireland now have a robotic surgical system, and many private hospitals. So there is huge potential for structured delivery of robotic surgery training and surgical training. And I think it is important to recognise those who pioneered robotic surgery in Ireland in their respective surgical specialties, so we could get to this point. Doing something for the first time in an untried and untested system poses great challenges, but all listed on this slide achieved just that, achieved it with great success, and paved the way for us now to build on their progress and bring things to the next level. Progressing structured robotic surgery training in Ireland has been greatly aided by the appointment of Professor Barry Maguire as Professor of Postgraduate Surgical Education in RCSI. A urologist and robot enthusiast, Barry has really championed a structured approach to robotic surgery, leveraging the education experience and expertise available in RCSI and involving experienced robotic surgeons in all relevant specialties from all parts of the country into a national robotic surgery leads group. And I sit as the general surgery lead within this group. And our aims to date have been to engage with all robotic stakeholders in Ireland to clearly understand the current landscape, but also understand the unmet needs in good clinical practice and training, and work collaboratively with experienced robotic surgeons to integrate robotic surgery training into surgical training and clearly define a curriculum for this. We have identified some really interesting data in work led by Stephanie Krogan, urology trainee. They received input from 87 stakeholders involved in delivery of robotic surgery in Ireland, including CEOs, clinical directors, and industry partners. Interestingly, in 2024, over 50% of current robotic surgeons have completed dedicated robotic surgery fellowships, and 1 in 3 robotic surgeons are still within their first 5 years of practice in the early career cohort. There was clear support from this group for dedicated robotic surgery operating theatres and non-technical skill training. Measurement of surgeon and unit level KPIs was also strongly supported, and this data has supported the development of a national robotic surgery best practice guideline by the Robotic Surgery Leads Group that is currently in final draft. But I think importantly from this data, we are now in a very good space for introduction of structured robotic surgery training for trainees. We have broad access to systems and a large consultant trainer pool that are experienced. And I really loved seeing the free text suggestion from 2 respondents under the heading of Key Performance Indicator of including training KPIs. For example, trainee console time for training units to place surgical training at the centre of a robotic surgery programme. For structuring robotic surgery integration into training, we are making steady progress as a group. Since our first centralised console-based robotic simulation training in RCSI in October 2022, we have really expanded this training, moving to cadaveric work, and in general surgery, we've vastly expanded our robotic procedure portfolio. And all of this work is hugely supported by Darragh O'Keefe, Simon, Tim, Niamh, and all of the RCSI SIM team, and of course Rosemary Cadigan, the vastly experienced robotic first assist. A formal curriculum integrating all of the elements I have described throughout this lecture are at advanced stages and expected to fully launch at the beginning of the 2025 academic calendar. And the beauty of progressing this multidisciplinary team of surgical innovators, educators, and experienced robotic surgeons has facilitated an academic ability to lead on simulation model design, where there is still unmet need. And also, as already referenced, assessment of skill transferability, which I think is the next big area of disruption in robotic surgical training as multi-platform programs expand. And how will this impact curriculum delivery? So to describe how the proposed robotic surgery training template is a blueprint and adaptable for training in future technologies when they arrive. We have identified the key stakeholders to involve, the key principal components required for education, and adaptable component descriptions for any technology, how these components can be delivered and assessed, and progression to procedural training, quality assured, certified, and supported for surgical trainees. I figured a rugby reference would be acceptable considering the All Blacks are in town tonight, but there are many professional surgical lessons to be learned from other high-performance environments, and I think it is very fair to say that Rassi Erasmus, the Springboks coach, is a real innovator in his field, and this has been crucial to their back-to-back World Cup victories. But he has a very important philosophy that he demands of his players to live by, and that is the main thing needs to remain the main thing. And the same could be said of surgery. With modern surgical careers evolving more and more into portfolio careers, I do believe it's important that surgery should remain as the main thing, and commitment to excellence in delivery of surgical care and surgical training central to all that we do. But I also believe it takes more than just training somebody to do an operation to make a surgeon. It takes inspiration. Critically important, it requires training and mentorship, but it also requires opportunity and supports and continual collaboration. I was first inspired to be a surgeon by the late Brian Waldron. As a third-year medical student in UCC attached to his service in Kerry General Hospital for my first hospital rotation, I saw the journey of a colon cancer patient from diagnosis to T2N0 final pathology. No further treatment needed. And that concept of curing cancer by performing an operation was something that utterly blew my mind. And from that day, I knew I wanted the privilege of being a colorectal cancer surgeon. I was inspired by my robotic trainers to embrace new technologies, to work hard, to continually improve. And I was inspired by many peers to advocate and collaborate, then as a trainee and now as a trainer. I was given the practical training, the mentorship, and the supports to master my craft of surgery. I was given the opportunity through various avenues to deliver on the clinical and non-clinical goals of my career, and I am thoroughly enjoying continued collaboration with fantastic colleagues on redefining and achieving further professional goals. And I would like to demonstrate immense gratitude to each and every person on the slide for supporting me personally. And looking around at current surgical trainees, I am very confident that the future sustainability of surgery in Ireland is in very safe hands. And I personally look forward to the future great things that will come down the line. And I believe a significant catalyst to future success is the culture of collaboration, working together, that has and is being fostered in our surgical community, and particularly amongst our surgical trainees. Because even the great Michael Jordan knew that talent alone could not win him a championship ring. It could only be achieved with effective teamwork. And on a personal note, I would like to thank my family and friends for all of their love and support. And thank you.
Well, that was truly outstanding, Christina, and I think a real surgeon's surgeon, talking about training, talking about the future of our profession, and I think it's clear to all of us that Christina's contribution to surgery in Ireland is at its beginning, and I think we're all very fortunate for that. So it's a great pleasure to award you the Millin Medal.
Colleagues and guests, that concludes the formal aspects of the Millin meeting. Again, sincere congratulations to the Millin 24 lecturer, Christina Fleming. Our thanks to you, our colleagues, for attending. I'd like to invite you to join us for a reception in the atrium. And finally, if I could ask you to be upstanding for the outward procession. Thank you.